Thanks y'all for coming out. Just a disclaimer up front, even though all four of us are elected officials in the legislature, we do not represent the legislature as a whole today. Anything we talk about is our own ideas or pieces we've extracted that's already made public out there. So at no point should you think this is what's going to happen in the upcoming legislature. Many pieces we hope to get out there. This is really a non-political event. It's not funded by any political party, any PACs, any campaign dollars of any kind. So with that, we also have quite a few elected officials in the room. Afterwards, when we have comments, we want to hear from the people, not the politicians. They can get to us anytime. If we do run out of questions from there, then we'll see if they got anything coming on. But let's see. So with that, I'll hand it over. Let Senator Glenn. No, just introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Senator Carl Glenn, Senate District 3, which is it's kind of the West Valley area, and then all the way over to the East Valley, kind of a swath right through the middle of Flathead County. I was served in the House for 4 terms, and this will be coming up. Will be my 4th session in the Senate. So then I'm termed out, and I'll be done. So that's my story.
I'm Greg Hertz from Polson. So I'm Senate District 7. It's Polson, and then heads west towards mostly Sanders County over in that area. I came in with Carl in 2013. Been, the 8 years in the House. We'll finish out here in the Senate in 2027, and I'm done also after that. I've had enough of this, but it's been an honor, and the last 2 sessions I'm the chair of Senate Taxation.
I'm Terry Falk. I've lived here 45 years, got a couple kids who were born, raised, and still live here. Some grandsons, so that's my skin in the game, if you will. That's my motivation. That's what gets me going for being a legislator, to be honest. I've served 2 sessions, been an appropriations person. I'm currently chair of the subsection A, General Government of Appropriations. I've always been kind of a Michael J. Fox, briefcase, economics, numbers kind of a guy, and just really want to make a difference for our state. I feel like we have taxes that are too high. I think we have government growth that's happening. I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about how the last session went. I'm committed to doing a lot of work in this interim to help good candidates get elected so we can make a difference for everyone, not just my grandkids. Thank you.
All right, with that, we have a whole lot of candidates in the room too. They're not elected officials that hopefully, we have a lot of candidates that are not elected at this time. So we'll see if we can get around to that. Right now, we're going to do the pledge and the opening prayer. Senator Nolan, if you come up for the opening prayer.
Our most beloved Heavenly Father, we are so grateful this day for the many blessings that we have, for living in this free land of America. We're so grateful that we have the heritage that we enjoy. We're grateful for the platform that we stand for, truth and virtue, beholden to Thee only, and we're grateful that we could be here today using the freedoms we have of our Constitution that was divinely inspired. We're grateful that we could unite today and have these wonderful men present to us. We pray that Thou can help them and inspire them, that they can enlighten us as to the things that are pertinent regarding this tax issue. Father, we do pray that we might be better servants, that we might stand for those virtuous things when we have evil confronted. Help us to stand strong, be vigilant, be diligent, and be faithful. We love Thee. We thank Thee especially for our Savior, especially at this wonderful time of year upon the Easter season. May we remember Him and all those things that He has done for us. And those who don't have our beliefs, Father, please bless them. Help them to know that we are Christian and that we appreciate all that Thou hast done and that we need to be unified in this endeavor. We love thee and acknowledge thy hand in all things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. And if you face the flag, the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I thank you. Be seated. Okay, we got about 7 minutes stage setter, and then we'll get right into the forum with the panel. So there's two truths when we're looking at taxes today. One is Flathead County over the past decades, we've really moved from the industrial agricultural economy to a tourism real estate based economy. And with that comes higher taxes for residential, for commercial, and for agriculture. And over the last 6-7 years, we've seen an enormous jump on the residential. So this is exacerbated with the passing of House Bill 231 and Senate Bill 542 that Senator Hertz will be talking right after this during the 69th session. That was last year. The first elements were implemented in 2025. This year, there's even more surprises coming with the upcoming property taxes. Truth two, real tax reduction can only be accomplished by reducing spending at the federal, state, county, incorporated townships, and or schools. Property taxes can be reduced through additional taxation elsewhere or by cutting spending. That's the only way you're going to actually reduce property taxes of all sorts. Flathead County, we've got over 3.3 million acres, one of the larger counties. 2.44 is owned by the federal government. That's the National Forest, that's Glacier Park, and that's part of the Bob Marshall Complex. We also have about 146,500 of state-owned lands. Median, this is the state look. In 2024, the residential median was 311,000. 2025 was 378,000 for the median cost of a home in Montana. That's a ratio increase of 67,000 or 21.5%. You see forest land at the bottom went down. Residential inside Flathead and Lake went up over 35%. So where you have that 378 up above, Flathead were 578, Lake's 465,000 with, like I said, over 35% increase. Commercial, it's even worse. The median in 2025 was 379,000 for the state. It's 787,000 in the Flathead and 344,000 in Lake County. That's up over 28%. So even though it shows Lake not coming up that fast, it is coming up even at a higher percentage rate. Gallatin, they only went up 17%, Missoula 24%, and Yellowstone with Billings 18%. So you're seeing a real extreme growth in values, which means more taxes. Here's the change for the forest. We're down about 20%, which is similar to what it is in the state, but the more the forest value comes down, the less money coming out of it. Mills levy, average at 12.58 in the state percent. Flathead and Lake both dropped mills. So that was a good news story. Yellowstone went up almost 17 mills. Missoula went up over 19 mills. Gallatin over 7, and we are negative. We went down over 3 mills each. So tax revenue. You see an enormous tax revenue in the Flathead. However, it only went up less than $2 million, and 1.1 million of that is through new growth, through new construction. Lake County only went up 2%, and that was 272,000 new growth. So once again, we're both about the same percentage of growth there, with majority going to new projects. So our county commissioners, we are holding the line on our property taxes in the Flathead. However, they are going up. When everybody else's comes down, 20, 30%, 80% comes down, and we're still going up in growth, that's where that bubble's being pushed out, and property taxes on commercial and residential and ag are going up. So property tax classes, Residential takes about 53%, commercial 17%, pipelines 13. There's 20-some classifications out there. Ag forest about 3.5%. Others with the other 15 taxes about 7.8%. See, counties take about 29.5% on the statewide of our property taxes. Local schools take 28.8, so about the same. Statewide education takes another 20%. Cities and towns takes 12%. Jurisdictions outside takes 4.8. Countywide education 4%, and 0.5% for community colleges. These do not include the TIF collections, and we're not going to talk TIFs today. I think Senator Hertz will be up here for about 3 hours on the diatribe on the taxes for TIF. So the high value assessments from 2015, the last 10 years, we've almost tripled our high value. That is not all from new construction. So in 2015, if you had a 10-year-old house that you bought in 2005 or 1995 for $300,000, it could now be worth over $1 million in the Flathead, especially, and to some extent down in Lake County. And if you're on the lake, it's definitely worth a whole lot more than you paid. Hence, we have the land-rich and cash-poor individuals. So, yeah. Nonprofits, every time a nonprofit comes in, someone has to pick up that property tax for that structure. That's where it gets pushed out to the residents, the commercial, and to the agriculture. So for nonprofit healthcare in the Flathead alone, vast majority of that, Logan Healthcare, they get a $7.9 million break for being a nonprofit. Religious, you got 178 religious exemptions at the Flathead. That's only 4.8 million. So NGOs, the warming centers, everything that's not government exempt or one of the other ones, the NGOs, that's about 2 million exempt property tax that's not being paid. Tourism, everyone says we get 850. If you look at the Institute of Tourism Recreation, they say we make 850 million off tourism, which the economic activities locally supported was 697. Economic activity indirectly is 451. Directly is the 697. However, there's no qualitative or quantitative means to say how much of that money stays. We know Xanterra and Pursuit are in Glacier. All their profits leave the state. Pursuit goes to Canada. Xanterra goes to Denver. You have Marriott's. You have all these federally owned hotels. Avis goes to Dallas, where their headquarters are at. So a lot of the profits are leaving. And then other profits go to the state and the federal government. You go to Glacier Park and pay, if you look at the tourism and recreation, they actually show where entrance fees are included in that 850 million. If you're a state park going to camp along the lake or something, that money goes to the state FWP. If you're in the park, that money goes to the feds, to the National Park Service. So there's a lot of pieces that aren't there that stay in the Flathead. So we'll talk about Senator Glimm's bill SB 90. He'll be bringing that up later. That was one aspect to try and fix some of that. So tourism's not the panacea that everybody says it is. Senior, we also heard that, well, should we take all the property taxes away if you're over 65 or over 62? If you do that, you push that out onto everybody else, so everybody else's property taxes are going to raise. So currently, we have taxpayer relief for senior citizens, the taxpayer eligibility for PTAP, and the elderly credit for the 70-year-olds. So here we have an example of someone who has $21,000 income for Social Security. Their home in the Flathead's worth $350,000. They're paying for about 650 mills total. That's a $3,000 a year tax bill. The Property Tax Assistance Program, the PTAP, can get that down about $2,457 off it for savings. And then you bring the elderly homeowner in, and that takes more off, so you're down to about $328. So that's a savings of $2,743 on the current system for the very low end of Social Security eligibility. We do have a lot of seniors that move to the valley with a whole lot of money, and you also have the seniors that have very little money and are in the same home they've been in for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So, Montana property tax collection, when people talk about, well, we gotta get rid of the property tax. Well, you're looking at about $2.5 billion statewide, and then another little over 500, for the 95 mills, the 6 mill university, and then the 1.5 mills that goes to VOTEC. So, you really need to find about $3 billion. You're not gonna find that unless you cut and say you bring a sales, people say they want a sales tax. If the property tax goes away and put it in the Constitution, where you can only have 2, possible. But you have to have, right now, without making significant cuts, that's what the delta you're gonna look at to try and make up somewhere. Residential property tax, these are the 3 cities where we were in 2024 and moving into 2025. And then here's the changes for 2026 when we go to the median. One note on the median, the state is 377, so when you see the 0.76 for the new means, that is what the median is. So what if you take the median by county instead of by state? That would say then the Flathead's 578 would move into the median, for the first 578,000 would be 0.76 instead of going straight to 0.90 and 0.1. So with that, I believe Senator Hertz is going to come up and talk 231, 231 and 542. Or stay there, you can stay there.
Thanks, Ed, that was really good. I'll put my timer on here. I get about 15 minutes to explain property taxes, Senate Bill 542 and 231. So, property taxes are confusing. We now have the most complex and progressive property tax system in the United States, right here in Montana. I would have never thought we had gotten there. But property taxes aren't like an income tax. So an income tax is pretty easy to calculate. If you're in the 10% tax bracket and make $50,000, you pay $5,000 in taxes. But so a lot of people are confused now. We've got these different tax rates, and that's not how property taxes work in Montana. So if you have a 1% property tax rate, and that's assessed to your $500,000 home, that doesn't mean your taxes are $5,000. It would in some states, because that's how some states calculate property taxes. And then some states take the assessed value and multiply it times the number of mills, which a mill raises $1 for every $1,000 of value. So it's a 1/1,000. So that's a little more complicated. Montana really gets complicated. We take the assessed value, we multiply it times the tax rate, and then we multiply times a mill. So it's really difficult for you to calculate what your taxes are going to be. And we just went to really complicated, because within Class 4 residential property, we've got 4 different tax rates. And they vary based on the value of your property. So it gets really confusing. And I've had a lot of people, this year we're going to have the second home tax kicks in, different tax on short-term rentals, a high tax on just vacant residential property at 1.9%. So that doesn't mean that you multiply your $500,000 value of home times 1.9%. But a lot of people are doing that and calling me and are just like, oh my God, Greg, all of a sudden I'm going to owe $9,000 on my property for 18. I go, no, that's not how it works. But your property taxes on your second home or your short-term rental or that vacant lot that you might own will most likely go up anywhere from 70 to 100%. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to get their tax bills this fall who haven't paid attention, and all of a sudden they've got a cabin worth $500,000. That lot that they had, they bought 2 or 3 lots, and now all of a sudden those tax bills are going to, on some of those, almost double. And people just, they They weren't following, they weren't paying attention, and it's not your fault. You know, it's people you sent to the legislature. And there's no doubt, there's a lot of discussion out there that 80% of the taxpayers' taxes did go down. I will not dispute that. That did happen. And those taxes went down because they raised taxes on about 20% of the other taxpayers in residential property. Mostly the 10% of the taxpayers really got hit hard. And the commercial taxpayers who have commercial property that's probably valued over more than $1 million really got hit hard. And that was not discussed at the legislature. At the legislature, during this passage of these bills, they said, well, commercial property is only going to go up about 10%. And residential property, yeah, there'll be some increases. Second home taxes will go up quite a bit, but everybody else isn't going to go up that much. And that wasn't what happened. And the commercial taxpayers really did. They did not expect, the Department of Revenue did not estimate correctly, and I asked them why. Why were your estimates so far off? Well, commercial property values are harder to predict. They're based on cash flow, interest rates. Where residential property, generally in an area, it kind of all increases at the same rate. And so it's a lot easier to predict what happened with commercial property. Property taxes are public information. I can find any one of your tax bills, and particularly in Flathead County, they use Tyler technology, and if I know your name or your address, I can go to Flathead County's website and I can punch in your name, your address. I can see your tax bill. In fact, I can see your history of your tax bill. I can see, I think they have in there maybe the last 7, 8 years. I can pull up your tax bills and I can see everyone, how much did your taxes increase? You know, and how much was the school? How much did the city, the county? And so that information is all public. And to me, when we start talking about, it's really easy to the legislature to say, well, these people's taxes are going to only go up, you know, 10%, 15, 20%. But when you start putting names on it, that's when it starts making a big difference. And to me, you know, you've seen my name called out in the paper. I'm entered into a lawsuit with Senator McGilvery and former Representative Regier, Senator Regier up here. And they always, well, Senator Hertz's taxes on his home went up, on his, you know, his $2.9 million mansion on Flathead Lake went up 50%. Yeah, it did. I have 5 other businesses in Montana. Those taxes went up to 30%. My tax burden on my personal life and my company went up $50,000. Yeah, I'm upset. But it's not about me. There are probably 100,000 people and business owners just like me. They're really upset. And you've got people here in Flathead. I want to get my glasses out here. Put some names on this. Bias Brewery, downtown Main Street, their taxes went up 30% in 2025. First American Titles, 39%. Black Rifle Coffee, 31%. Valley Bank, 45%. Brannigan's Pub, 30%. A law office building, 35%. So those are real numbers that taxes went up for people. There's more taxes that went up that I've talked to, you know, their taxes went up 50%, 100%. And it all depends on where you live and what happens. And what's the makeup of your county. You look at Lake County, 87% of the value in Lake County is residential property. So when you lower taxes, and that's why 80% of the taxpayers, most of the people in Montana, their homes are worth $500,000 or less. But if I drop the taxes on 80% of the taxpayers by an average of $500, and you're going to depend that 10% of the taxpayers are going to make that up, those 10% taxpayers, their taxes are really going to go up. You know, I've talked to a lot of people whose taxes and business owners, you know, they don't mind. Yeah, if you want to raise my taxes 5, 10% to help out some other people, that's fine. You know, but if you're going to raise my taxes 30, 40, 50, 100%, that's not fair. And that's the problem we ran into. And you look at income taxes, what we've been doing with income taxes, I've worked with the governor a lot on income tax. We've gone from a multi-rate income tax system trying to get to a flat tax system, which, you know, I percent support. But now with the governor and the people who passed this property tax bill, we went from a single rate property tax system to a multi-rate property tax system that really penalizes and goes after the top, 20% of taxpayers. To me, that's not fair. Taxes should be broad-based and fair. And property taxes are probably the worst form of taxation that we have in this country. I wish we could get rid of it, but as Ed pointed out, it's a big number and it's very difficult to generate those kind of numbers even with a sales tax. Now, there was a lot of talk about property taxes. Well, let's just tax the rich out-of-staters in the Yellowstone Club. You can't do that. There's some constitutional problems with that. And if your taxes went down here in Flathead County, $500 on your property, somebody else's taxes in Flathead County went up to pay for that. It wasn't somebody in the Yellowstone Club or someone down in Missoula or down in Lake County. It was someone in your taxing jurisdiction, because that's all we have is a big tax pie. And basically what we did is we carved that pie up and decided some taxpayers are going to pay a lot more than they have been previously. And the whole basis of this and the property tax issue has been, as Ed pointed out, was the escalating value of your property. And if your property went from $300,000 up to $600,000 over the last 5 or 6 years or even higher, your income didn't follow that. And if you had a house that's worth $800,000 and now is worth $1.5 million or $2 million, the income on that, the people who own that house, their income didn't go up either. But for some reason, these people who supported this bill, for some reason they think if you have a house that's worth more than $1.5 million, you need to pay 30, 40, 50, or 100% more. Why? It makes no sense, because their income didn't go up either. I got so many calls from individuals who are retired. Yes, they have good retirement income, but when their property taxes went up $15,000, one person's, they called me a widow, her taxes went up $30,000 a year. Yeah, she's got income of about $100,000 a year, but you can't take that out of your budget. So now they're forced to sell their property, and that's what is going to happen with a lot of people, especially when people get their tax bills coming up in 26. And what's that do? That perpetuates the problem that we're in right now. Who's going to buy that piece of property most likely, especially if it's a higher value property? It's probably going to be some individual from out of Montana, and they're probably going to have a lot of money in their pocket, and they're probably going to overpay for that property. And what's that do? It just continues to perpetuate the exact problem that we're trying to stop here. So, these different rates, we're probably, like I said, we're one of a few states that have these different tax rates now based on the value of your property, which make no sense whatsoever. And there's a lot of problems with that too. I'll talk about the lawsuit that I filed and another lawsuit that we also are working on here as we head up here. Where am I at in time? 11 minutes? All right, so I want to make sure we have a lot of time here for questions as we get done here. But I think I've about covered everything that I wanted to touch on right now. I think I'll touch on also right now, you've seen stuff in the paper. There's a lot of articles out there and that are very misleading, particularly from these people who have supported it. And of course, the governor and the supporters of this, all they want to talk about is, oh, well, we helped 80% of the taxpayers. Yeah, you did. But you really took advantage of the other 20% of the taxpayers, as I've stated. And then there's a lot of misinformation that is in those op-eds. In fact, one of them that I just read talked about the Hertz-Regier tax increase that's coming at you if we win the lawsuit, and how for some reason that if we win this lawsuit, the courts are going to make every one of you, including myself, who got a $400 rebate, you have to pay it back. That's not going to happen. You know, there's not a court around that's going to basically tell you, I don't know how they force you to pay it back anyway. And then also there's some misinformation too. See, these people, they're very good at being dishonest and about telling you, and that's the worst thing that a politician can do, is to be dishonest with the public, because it'll come back. I mean, sooner or later you're going to find out that these people are not telling you the truth, and they're not. And part of that article was that accused me, and that, you know, basically in 26, tax rates for property worth more than 1.5 million is going to go from 2.2 down to 1.9. And they're saying that that's going to reduce your taxes. Not necessarily because your tax rate down will your taxes go down, because it depends on who else's taxes went down and what their tax rate did. When you look at tax rates that went down to 0.76 and you pulled maybe 60 or 70 or 80% of taxpayers' taxes down, and now you have to redistribute that between these other people. It doesn't really matter if their rates came down too. You're just pushing more taxes over to them. And even when these tax rates come down, mills float up to generate the same amount of money. And kind of, I think one of the easiest ways to think about it is the taxpayer pie. Let's say you have this imaginary town with 1,000 houses in it. Every house is worth $500,000. So they all pay the same taxes. And at a tax rate of 1.35, our old tax rate. So now you're going to come in and you're drop the tax rate down to 0.76. Every one of these taxpayers or house values, taxable value is going to go down. But guess what? Local governments, schools, they now get to raise their mills because state law allows them to raise the same amount of money plus 1/2 the rate of inflation plus all new property. So even though you can tell them, hey, I lowered your tax rate, their taxes could still go up. And that's the problem and the confusion when it comes to calculating property taxes, particularly here in Montana. And how we do it, we're one of the few states that assesses property at the state level. Before 1972, we had county assessors. You elect your county assessor, and each county was responsible for assessing property in Montana. There's only about 3 or 4 states that do it the way Montana does. And you know, I think that's one thing we really need to go back and look at what we changed in 1972, and then also going from appraising your property every 6 years to every 2 years. I think that was another big mistake. I opposed that in 2015 because back, you know, we've seen property escalate up and down, particularly here in the Northwest. And what that allowed us to do, and we had the 6-year property reappraisal, we could phase it in. So if you had a really spike like we've had over the years, we didn't have to bring all that increase all over in one year. In fact, there were years, you know, it was phased in over 4 or 5 years. And so the dramatic shift between tax classes wasn't there. So there's a lot of problems with our property tax system. This tax bill, 542 and 231, did not fix it whatsoever. And if you just pick up Senate Bill 542 and start reading it, that doesn't tell you the whole story, because House Bill 231 amends Senate Bill 542. And in fact, House Bill 231 is about 40 pages. So you can't even read 231, the whole thing, because guess what? About the first 30 pages are void. And you look at the very end of 231, it says sections 1 through 20 something are voided, and now we're going to amend 542 with 231. So you have to lay these bills side by side to even figure out what they do. And that's another portion of our lawsuit that I'll talk about later. So I think I've talked long enough here. We can let someone else have the mic.
Okay, so did everybody follow every bit of that? Perfect. Welcome to property tax in the state of Montana. Because that's exactly it. Super complicated, right? And Greg did an excellent job. I don't mean to poke fun at him, but I'm poking fun at the system. This is what we've done. We've made them literally, he's right, the most complicated property tax structure in the whole United States. we're number one. We win. I went to a national conference, and one of the guys that was about taxes, he's, oh, you're from Montana. Yeah, you guys did great. We used to say, I think it was New Hampshire, used to have the most messed up property tax. He said, no, you guys said, here, hold my beer, watch this. So we do. Super complicated. I brought a bill last session that tried to really just, and it wasn't my idea, so I can't even take credit for that, but it's one we've tried before. But it's super simple, right? It says, we're going to take some of this, everybody brags about tourist dollars. Let's take some of those tourist dollars, let's put them to work for property taxpayers in the state of Montana. So there's two tourist taxes that are on hotels, rental cars, that kind of stuff. Two separate ones, they're 4% apiece. And so we were going to swipe most of that money, and we were going to put it back to everybody to give a credit on your taxes that would show up as, just like you had prepaid your taxes, here's a line item. And I think the original estimate was like 450 bucks. Now, if 450 bucks wasn't enough, well then let's just find more money at the state and we can put it into that account and it would come back to property taxpayers. And basically everybody gets that same credit. Pretty simple idea, right? Well, some of that money goes to advertising and promotion for some special stuff out of Department of Commerce, and they get really defensive about when you try and take their money. And so that was really hard to get all that. So in our first committee hearing, in order to get out of that committee, they basically whacked it in half and said the only money I could take for my bill was the part that was going to go to the state general fund. We can short the state this much money. Okay, well, it's better than nothing. We can always add to it, right? So now we're looking at about $200. We got it out of the Senate. I think everybody voted for it. We got it over to the House, and then $200 wasn't enough. Well, okay, raise it. But that was the argument, that $200 wasn't going to make a big enough difference. And the other argument against it was that we were taking money from the state. Well, so Greg is a tax expert. He has sat on tax forever, chaired the committee for as long as I can remember. I'm a budget guy. All my time in the House I spent on appropriations, and now in the Senate I'm on finance and claims, and I chair finance and claims. And what I can tell you about the state budget is that we keep growing. The state budget keeps growing. Grows bigger and bigger every year. There's a lot of discussion about how much did we grow. I did an op-ed just a little bit ago, and I talked about two numbers that you've maybe heard about. One of them is that we grew 17%. 17% number is an accurate number. What it gauges is what the general fund dollars were in House Bill 2. House Bill 2 is our general funding bill, basically funds all of state government. It's what we work on. It's what we're constitutionally required to do every legislative session. And those dollars, those general fund dollars, went up by 17%. Now, I didn't vote for that budget because to me that's too much growth, and we should have done more to help. We should have given it back. We should have done more to help with the property tax problem. But there was a working majority, not the party of majority in the legislature. There was a working majority in the legislature, which was made up of the Democrats and a few Republicans, and they passed that budget. They passed a budget that grew the money that we really control 17%. Now they will point back and say, we only grew at 0.7%. That 0.7% number is if you count every single dollar of government money that flows through the state of Montana. A lot of that we don't touch. That's federal dollars. That's benefits that are statutory that flow through state government, and we don't even touch. As the legislature, we don't even look at it. On top of that, we're rolling out of the last 4 years where the federal government spent money like an insult to drunken sailors. All the money that got spent during COVID, we grew and grew and grew. We still beat it. We still beat that by 0.7%. Almost all that money is drying up, and yet we still were able to spend more. A big portion of that is because of the 17% that we spent that we control. So it matters who you send to Helen. That's a key fact. And it's not just the label behind their name. You need to figure out how they think. You need to figure out, do they think state government is too big? Because I do, because we've grown. Every session, we grow state government. This time, we grew by leaps and bounds. The other thing that people point out, somebody pointed this out to me once a little bit ago, and they said, you know, property taxes pay for the things that we all use, right? Our kids go to school, we drive on county roads. When somebody falls down and needs an ambulance, you pick up the phone and you dial 911, you want the fire department to show up, right? Those are property taxes. Those are things that we all use. All the money that the state gets goes to incarcerate and provide for Department of Health and Human Services, which are not all things that all of us use. They're things that some people use. I've never been to prison, so I can't say I've used any of those funds. I toured the Shelby prison one time, but they let me out, so that's good. So the session was tough because we had the working majority. We had 9 senators that on day one flipped basically everything we had set up. And work starts in the legislature long before that first day in January. We spend a lot of time down there getting things set up and ready to go, and we set up committees, and we do a lot of work ahead of time. On day one, there was 9 senators that voted with all the Democrats, and they flipped the Senate on its head. One of the biggest components of that was that they added 4 new members to the Senate Finance and Claims Committee, and my vote tally flip-flopped. So, where as the chairman of Finance and Claims, I was confident we could have come out of there with a conservative budget, they flipped that vote tally, and it didn't matter what we did in Senate Finance and Claims, because it didn't matter what argument you gave, it didn't matter what questions you asked, the vote tally was the same. It was a done deal. The cake was baked. I said that over and over and over during the legislative session.
23-27.
There was a 23-27 vote in the Senate. Over and over and over again. That's how the tax bills got pushed through. That's how the bloated budget got pushed through. It matters who you send to Helena. I think that's good for now.
Awesome. Thank you. If Representative Ed is the head coach and I am the quarterback, I'm going to call an audible. Because I think I'm not going to talk a lot about what's necessarily on the agenda. But I guess these other people don't have the agenda, do they? All right, anyway. But I want to just emphasize and piggyback and accentuate even further Senator Glim's statement, it matters who you send to Helena. I think a lot of times the people who have these little special deals that they make, this working majority, which I want to be clear, we were not part of the working majority. This working majority, they think that you don't really pay attention. Worse yet, I think they assume and they actually think that you might be, I want to use the word ignorant, because they believe that they can do what they want. And so in the spirit of trying to advocate for more voters, because I'm pretty sure everybody in this room has voted pretty much every election, but we have to get the vote out. And that means we have to talk to other people, and that means we have to know what we're talking about. And that's what I want to add, just a little bit more color to these tax bills, to just show you maybe, in my opinion, just how awful it is. And also just impart maybe some of the philosophy that I have. But one of the things that people talk about as conservative legislators is what is good legislation. Good legislation, particularly in the tax area, needs to be understandable and it needs to be relatively easy to comply with. I've had multiple conversations with people who are hiring consultants to try to figure this out. I've had multiple people say, I want to become a consultant so I can figure it out and explain to people, because it's really that complicated. There was somebody on the floor on the other side of the aisle, I believe this was in, well, I know it was in the Senate, who said this: I'm a smart numbers person, but I don't understand this bill, but I'm going to vote for it anyway. Those are the kinds of legislators that some of us, not us really, because Florida does a really good job of sending good legislators, but those are some of the legislators and how they think. This is not okay. There's only 150 of us. That means 1/150th already said that, and you know that represents more people than that. Another thing this bill did is it grew government administration tremendously. A lot of FTE, full-time equivalent employees, to try to figure this out, to work with all y'all trying to navigate the issues. There are roughly 50,000 long-term rentals in the state of Montana. They extended the application date, you probably saw that, by about 3 weeks to try to get everybody in. Even with extending it, they only got about 35,000 applications. So what's happening to that other 15,000? What's going to happen when they get their tax bill and they realize, oops, I should have filed for this homestead exemption, but I didn't do it. And they get their tax bill. There's going to be a shock. We're going to hear about it, and we're prepared to hear about it. But those are the kind of things that we need to know now so that we can get behind good candidates. And there's a bunch in the room. Sean, great candidate. Never been elected, okay? New guy. I'm going to miss somebody. Kathy Love for sure. Kathy Mitchell, awesome. Kathy, we need her in the legislature. She's running against somebody who we don't want in the legislature, let's put it that way. And maybe he's in the room, I don't know. I'll talk to him later. On the microphone, I asked in appropriations, how are we going to figure out who's doing what with their property? Because one of the penalties in this is short-term rentals. And no matter what you think about short-term rentals, the process is really difficult to figure out, well, how do I know, as a property appropriator, property tax, Department of Revenue person, how they're using this property? So I asked them, what's the process going to be? What's that application look like? I don't understand how you're going to figure out these people. They're not just going to come walking up to you and say, hey, I'm a short-term rental, possibly, right? The answer was stunning, and I heard at least on 2 occasions on the microphone, one time in interim committee, well, we might just have to rely on the neighbors to explain to us what's going on in that house. That is awful tax policy, awful. So one of the premises for passing the tax bill was we're going to really stick it to the people who have a lot of money. We're going to stick it to all these second home and vacation home owners because they can afford it, and they're all these out-of-staters. They don't spend much time in the state. We were told that they leech off of the services in the state of Montana, and then they leave. And of course, there's only partial truth to that. Yes, they're in the state part-time, but they pay for their lawn maintenance, their snow removal, their security, their cleaning service, and yes, they don't stay here in the state, so they don't use the services. They don't use the schools. They don't use fire and ambulances was talked about. So we're looking to give Torsten them out. And come to find out, they knew this, I wasn't aware of this during session, 72% of the vacation homeowners in Montana are Montanans. They're not out-of-staters. So here we go, stick it to them. Many of these people are going to have to sell their properties, as was mentioned earlier. They can't afford it. Another smaller segment is irrevocable trusts. We learned that they are not eligible for the homestead exemption. Who has irrevocable trusts? It's usually older people, usually widows, because it's a tax consideration for their long-term estate tax picture. They will have to pay the higher tax rate because they do not qualify for the homestead. Are they going to have to sell their properties? Yeah, I imagine some will. And then another thing I just want to mention on this particular angle is I think this is so important to have legislators who have financial literacy. And there's a lot of good legislators in this room that have financial literacy. We're speaking to the choir here. The people need to understand how human behavior works, okay? Like if I see a gas station across the street that's charging $4 a gallon and this one's charging $3 a gallon, where am I going to go, okay? In Seattle, they instituted this new income tax, capital gains tax. They don't have a quote-unquote income tax for the rich people on capital gains. What they didn't intend as a consequence is that some of the rich people would leave, and we see this happening in California. So Jeff Bezos left his home in Seattle and went to Florida. That one move required them to lower their projected property tax, or excuse me, capital gains tax revenue by $1 billion.
Wow.
People make decisions based on our tax policy. Our tax policy needs to understand that, and I think a lot of these people don't understand. A lot of these legislators that pass this bill don't understand that. Even the director of the Department of Revenue in a public meeting in Big Sky said, yeah, I think we probably are shooting the goose that lays the golden eggs by taxing these people. And it's just, I mean, honestly, I see a lot of heads bobbing. This is common sense. We're not seeing the heads bobbing in the floor of the House of Representatives. They're not doing it. I mean, so we've got to get good candidates to get these things changed. So one of the other things that was mentioned is there was a possible workaround. Well, these people that have second homes, you know, if they want to avoid the second home, occasion home tax, well, they could just rent their house out for 7 months. And in quotes, rent it out, right? Rent it out to a relative, to somebody who's managing the property. They're not going to necessarily live there. Nobody's going to be knocking on their door, right? See if there's somebody actually home most of the time. This actually was said by people who were proponents of this bill. My first question is, well, what does that happen? What does that do to the tax revenue projection? Obviously, whatever we projected is going to go downhill fast. So I found out in this last interim meeting a couple weeks ago that the amount of primary residence or long-term rental applications total went up $25,000. So one of the thoughts was, well, we had that many sales happen and new construction, new property. No, we had 7,000 new homes built in the state last year and 10,000 total property sales. So, and it went up 25,000. I don't know. I think that's an issue that we will encounter down the road. So, just want to talk real briefly then about maybe what I see as the root of the issue. I don't want to belabor this point too much, but what we have in the legislature is we have people in this majority working group that does not include the conservative Republicans who think of OPM, other people's money. It's a common phrase. They see your money or your potential money as their money. Am I doing something wrong with the microphone? Okay. So all they see is the ability to raise more tax revenue through whatever means they can. And it's not their objective, it's not one of their thoughts to make government efficient or smaller, but only to grow it. And so what is their solution to fix this problem? It's a third tax. That's silly. They want to grow government even more. And as Representative Burr was talking about the sales tax is constitutionally limited to 4%. The Legislative Fiscal Division did a study on that to see how much revenue that would possibly raise. It's about $1.4 billion. So to get $3 billion of the property taxes replaced, we need an 8% sales tax. I know, isn't that crazy? So I don't know what if their plan I don't know what their plan is, to be honest, but I keep hearing that on the microphone. So the amendments, Ed wanted me to talk a little bit about that briefly, and then I'm done for this section. I spent a lot of time on the floor trying to make amendments to these bills. I wanted to make it simpler. I wanted to avoid the special treatment features. I wanted to get more dollars back to the people through mechanisms like Senator Glimp's SB 90. It failed miserably. I mean, we gave it a good try. We kept trying to blast SB 90 onto the floor. We had some really close votes. Didn't quite make it. We would have then, if it got blasted onto the floor for a revote, then it would have had to have passed. But the majority wasn't interested in doing this. And you have to understand that we have a number of people. I like to say that there's a number of Republicans that have taken the R brand, which is like the Mercedes brand, and they're applying it to a Fiat. Fiat, that's also a government term. Anyway, a cheap car, Yugo. But they don't meet the standards of a Republican, okay? And that's what we need to do in the elections. We need to understand and evaluate all our candidates. Do they represent what the Republican Party represents? Do they represent the platform? Are they not only conservative in social and justice type issues, but are they conservative in fiscal issues? And I'm here, I don't want this to happen again. Last session was brutal. It was really, really hard. We basically had no power. We just sat and waited for the clock to run out. I don't want that to happen again. I'm committed to working with candidates like Kathy and Sean to get better fiscally, Jim Riley, can't forget him back there, better fiscally understanding, responsible people so we can make a difference. So that's why I'm here.
All right, we're going to go around for about 40 minutes on some questions, and we want to stop by 5:40 or so to let you guys tell us your issues, concerns, any ideas you have for fixing property taxes in the tax system. But where Terry talked about the 72% of Montanans that own the second homes, and where do you think the majority of that is? Who has the greatest percentage of that? Flathead County. When we got our tax structure back from the Revenue Committee that Senator Hertz, myself sit on, majority of the counties had 400 or 500 people that raised up on residents. Everything else got pushed up. Gallatin had almost 6,000. We had way north of 7,000 people that went from raised 40, 60, 80, 100%. We got one lady down in Big Fork. 10 years ago, she was paying $3,000 for property tax. 2024, it was up to $18,000. 2025, she's paying $34,000, and she cannot afford it. And it's going to go up another 60, 69% this year. So we say everyone, Gallatin went up 9% on average, ours went up 35% on average. That's average. Some went up over 100%, a lot 40, 60, 80%. So the insanity of, it's morally corrupt. It may be legal, but it is morally corrupt. So with that, we'll start off with Senator Hertz, and he mentioned he's going to talk some lawsuits on against 542.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, we did file a lawsuit in January. So as we were progressing through the session, not only myself, but others stood up on the Senate floor and the House floor at times, talking about how these bills were unconstitutional. And I was waiting after the session. People asked, well, Hertz, why didn't you file a lawsuit sooner? Well, I was hoping a lot of the business community would get together and proceed with a lawsuit. There was a lot of, they did some studying on it, but their problems were, they were really concerned that there'd be retribution. So if all the business owners come together, file a lawsuit, what's going to happen, you know, if they win or they lose? Will there be more taxes levied against business owners, second homeowners? So a lot of them just weren't happy about it. So I mean, as I told you before, it cost me a lot of money, and I was like, well, I got to do something here. This is not right. This is the worst tax policy I've ever seen just about anywhere. So we decided to file a lawsuit. And when you look at lawsuits, think about different lawsuits, particularly ones that environmental groups file. When there's some blogging that's going to go out on a hungry horse, of course, you know, an environmentalist file a lawsuit. Most of those lawsuits are filed over process. You know, you didn't study the impacts on grizzly bears or bull trout. So what happens with a lot of lawsuits, and that's probably the easiest way to get something stopped. So talking to our lawyers, that's when we decided to come out with the first lawsuit, was a process lawsuit. Article 5, Section 11 of the Montana Constitution was violated considerably in this particular Senate Bill 542. Senate Bill 542 is a conglomerate of several different bills. Senate Bill 231, House Bill 231, Senate Bill 90, the rebate bill, and then they threw in a couple of other items into that also. Senate Bill 542 started out as a 3-page bill that basically all it did was froze everybody's valuation for 2 years. That's what it was. That's when it left the Senate. I think it left the Senate almost unanimously, and over to the House. When it came back in the House, it was almost 45 pages long. They had shoved 231, Senate Bill 90 in there, and a bunch of other stuff. So if you look at Article 5, Section 11 of the Montana Constitution, talks about bills. A law shall be passed by a bill that shall not be so altered or amended on its passage through the legislative process to change its original purpose. Obviously, 542 was changed. Each bill except general appropriation bills shall contain only one subject. 542 contains multiple subjects. It talks about different tax rates. It's got a rebate. It also has appropriations to the Department of Revenue, $3 million for the 20-some new staff members they needed to implement the bill. And there's other items in there. And then not only that, 542 was amended by 231 outside the bill itself. The reason for this constitutional article, which has been around since our original Constitution, 1889, was to make sure the public could follow what was going on in the legislature. And make sure that we don't have 2,000-page bills like they do in Congress, that they got to pass a damn thing before they know what's in it. But we passed, even though this bill's only 45 pages, I can guarantee you, most people who voted for it didn't really understand it. They didn't understand, a lot of them have buyer's remorse now too. They didn't understand they're going to put so much taxes on business owners. They didn't understand that 70% of second homeowners in Montana are Montana residents. So that's the first lawsuit that we filed. It's working through the process right now. You might have seen where the governor has asked the Supreme Court to intervene. I don't particularly have a big issue with that, because most likely it's going to end up at the Montana Supreme Court, whoever wins at the district court. It might just accelerate things a lot faster. And we started with this process because it's very easy. There's not a lot of discovery going on in this lawsuit. It's all based on legislative record. There's no hearsay. They can actually see what happened. They can see what Lou Jones did, what he had planned prior to even getting this bill over there, how it was manipulated through the process. And so we expected that to happen. And the reason I did that is because, quite frankly, if the courts don't tell the legislature to make a change, I don't think the legislature is going to come back and revisit property taxes. We probably don't have enough votes. Why? Just look at the politics. 80% of the people are fine in your district. Why should I change it? I can listen to the 9 or 10%, all the business owners scream and yell at me, but they don't vote for me. So that's one of the reasons that I brought. And it's just it's really bad policy. We've got another lawsuit that's a lot more complex that's getting worked on right now. We'll probably get it filed in another 2 or 3 weeks. It's a little more complex, but it has to do with equal protection and equal treatment of taxpayers. You cannot treat similar taxpayers differently under the Montana Constitution and some sections of the U.S. Constitution. That's why Montana has 16 different classes of property. Because in order for us to have different tax rates for different types of property, we have to put it in a separate class. That's why electrical transmission lines are taxed at a class at 12%. And other properties out there have different classes. They may be taxed at 3% and 6%. This bill could have been passed legally if they would have created different classes of property. But you can't take, there's been numerous court cases in Montana, you can't take a class of property like residential property
and assign it now with four different tax rates. You're treating similar taxpayers differently, and that's unconstitutional in Montana, and we're hoping that the courts will agree with. So that's the second lawsuit that's being teed up here, and we'll be working through the process here soon. Now, lawsuits cost money, so I hope, I put in $5,000 of my own money, but we're going to need $50,000 to $75,000. We've raised about 40, but anybody, if you can help contribute, whether it's $100, $1,000, whatever, we continually need support to help fund these lawsuits as we go forward. And there's some forms out front out there where you can make a donation. There's also forms, that Ed will have up here too. But that's where we're headed with this lawsuit. We feel really good about it. There was just also recently, you'll see, there was a law firm out of Salt Lake City that just brought out some information, public information that talks about our second lawsuit. And it talks about several court cases in Montana that were pre and post our 1972 Constitution. But, when you go to the courts, you never know what's going to happen. It's always a crapshoot. People ask me, what do you think? I go, well, 50-50. We'll see. We got a really good judge out of Bozeman, but not so confident in the Montana Supreme Court and the way they rule it.
Thank you, Senator Hertz. The forms out front, they're the policy action forms with the mission statement. So if you leave, you want to pick one up and donate $20, $50, $10,000, it's greatly appreciated. Next, we're going on to the fixes for property taxes. We're going to start with Senator Glimm, then go down to Representative Falk. And Senator Glimm's going to look at the fixes as well as maybe what he's looking at for the new and improved SB 90 next session.
So, fixes for property tax. I think, I didn't mention before, and I wanted to mention this, and I think they've hit on it some, that a lot of the second homeowners in Montana weren't necessarily out-of-state people. I live west of town, and I have numerous people out there, lots of that, all those little lakes, they used to be owned with timber company all around them, and they couldn't log next to the lake, so they sold those lots off. And people would buy them, and they'd throw up a little cabin, right? And it'd been in their families for generations. Those people are getting hit with these second homeowner rates, and they aren't going to be able to afford to keep them. Those were things that, 6 years ago I was looking at, and I was having people come to me and say, geez, I'm not able to, these property taxes are killing me on the lake property because somebody moved in next door and they built a mansion, and I've got a shed and an outhouse, and I'm paying thousands and thousands of dollars for property tax. Well, just wait, because that's really going to skyrocket now. It's not fair. So what we need to do is not shift, and I think we haven't talked a lot about how this whole thing was a shift, right? It just shifted money around. Nobody cut, no new funds, it just shifted it around. So whatever, property tax district you live in, whether it's the school district or the fire district, there's thousands of them, right? And they all are different. When somebody's goes down, somebody else's goes up, because it all has to equalize. So what government was doing in these bills was picking winners and losers. We shouldn't be doing that. We need to be more fair about it. So this gets back to one of the fixes that I think, and Senate Bill 90 was like this, right? What we were looking for was a new revenue source for counties. So there's a plethora of ideas, right? We could take beer and wine, alcohol tax. We could take marijuana tax. We could take a vehicle license. We could start shifting some of these dollars that come into the state, shift them back to the county so that they can lower your property taxes. This is a more equitable way of doing it. The state has been growing. We've been flush with money for the last many sessions. We're coming into a time where funds are going to be a little bit tighter for us because we have structural imbalance coming up. But we still need, state government needs to tighten the belt. People all across the state with property taxes are having to tighten their belt. It's time for the state to buck up and do a little bit of belt tightening too. So there's lots of options, and I think all of us up here, we're all willing to look at all the options, right? We aren't set on one single idea. We'll look at them all and try and come up with the best idea. That's not what happened last session. There was one idea, and if you weren't on board with that idea, boy, the train was going to run you over. That was just flat it. It was my way or the highway, and we weren't discussing. We weren't having any amendments to it. There was no changes. It was getting shoved down and ended up getting shoved down not in the same bills that it started with because they couldn't get those passed. They shoved them into other bills at the last minute. Last very few days of legislative session, that's when these bills got passed. And they claimed they knew exactly what was going to happen in them, and lo and behold, they didn't. And now we've got the mess. So there's another option. Is somebody going to talk about Galt Steel?
No, you can't.
Okay, I'll bring it up. It's still in, Senator Wiley Galt brought up a constitutional amendment that he's going through the process and trying to get that figured out. But that is going to allow residential property taxpayers to pick the lowest of 3 years. 24, 25, or 26, you get to pick the rate that you were at, and then it's going to go forward, but it can't grow any more than 2%. Devil's in the details. We don't know all the details yet, but on the face of it, kind of seems like it might be something of a solution. I think probably what's going to happen, it's only residential, I believe, at this point, and so it's maybe, if it was all classes of property tax, the locals would have got really, really shorted, because if you could pick the lowest value, lowest tax that you paid in the last 3 years, everybody's going to pick their lowest, and locals are really going to get shorted. It's now limited to residential. I don't think the locals are going to get shorted as much. I think they're still going to get shorted, so that's probably going to be up to us to try and backfill that. And we have a phrase that we use at the legislature, and it's we're hoping it catches on. It's called starve the beast. If we can short the money that the state has, they can't grow as much. So if we have to backfill some of the locals with some of the essential services that locals use, that's maybe a good thing. Flathead County does a really good job. I think you were going to talk about the differences in counties. So I'll just pass it on.
Very good, Senator Glenn. Yeah, I mean, to simplify it and boil it down, it's about the budgets, is kind of what he was saying. The budgets, it matters who you vote in to county commissioner and your city council. In Missoula County, property taxpayers pay for the county budget $2,235 a year in Missoula County. In Flathead County, it's $1,211. Okay, so wait a minute. Why is that different? The population isn't that much different, so it's not a density issue. Let's be honest, it comes down to the appropriators and the people who are proposing and passing the budget. Kalispell City, I had a discussion with the mayor about 8-9 weeks ago. Still waiting to hear back on any kind of a definitive answer. Kalispell City is honestly the worst in the state for spending over population plus inflation growth over the last 10 years. Flathead County is one of the best of the major counties. So it matters who you elect. Schools are another concern. They continue to grow their budget, even though the enrollment trend is flat to in some cases even down. and they're going through the refunding, reevaluation that comes, I think, every 10 years. And they have a fairly extensive laundry list. Sorry if you work for the school. I'm not trying to throw the schools under the bus, but that's kind of where they are at the moment. And what can we do as taxpayers then is we need to vote responsibly on levies. I had a bill in the House that didn't make it out of committee. I have property in the city of Kalispell. I am a property taxpayer, but because I don't live in the city limits, I don't get to vote on the levies. Sounds a little bit like taxation without representation to me, but the bill didn't get anywhere. But but to the extent you are able to vote on it, and that leads me to one of the solutions, because you know they are odd year votes. The turnout's generally fairly low. It ends up being a fairly low bar to get across to get enough voters to vote for the levy, and so it ends up being kind of a stacked against us essentially as taxpayers. One of my suggestions would be, all right, well, if you want to grow a certain dollar amount, maybe it's $50 per house average, maybe it's a percentage gain in your budget, then particularly for, say, the city, you want to raise a certain amount of money, well, then you have to get a certain amount of turnout for the vote to be valid. If the turnout isn't there, then the majority, I mean, ideally, I'd like to see us all vote, okay? But maybe that would, I don't know. It just seems odd to me that we have 10 to 15% of the population voting for the large tax increase on a levy that all of us pay for. Maybe there's other ways we can handle that. Maybe there's other ways we can tweak that. I'm not saying that's a great, beautiful, designed solution. And I'm hoping in the Q&A that maybe you folks have some ideas for what we can do in that area or any other area. One of the things we need to do, I'm going to go off the reservation here a bit with Senator Byrne. I want to talk about TIFs. I'd like to see TIFs get expired. TIFs need to be able to be done and over after a set period of time. I'm talking about tax increment financing. It's extra money that has to be paid for by other taxpayers in order to cover it. They borrow money against it and then leverage even more money, and frankly it's a mess. So we need to take care of this issue, and we need to do this in the legislature, in my opinion. We certainly would love your support for that. Natural resources. We're the treasure state. For goodness sake, we're the treasure state. We have lots of treasures. Yes, I want to protect our treasures. I'm very much into animals and minerals and the environment and the beauty, and I enjoy it, and I love it. But do we treat animals more importantly than humans? It sure feels like we do sometimes, all right? So why not start to figure out ways to use our natural resources for our benefit? In the meanwhile, they're burning up if it's logging, okay? So it's not like we're saving them for a rainy day or some future moment. They just go away. So why not responsibly, carefully encourage and figure out ways to use our natural resources? We have high-paying jobs with natural resources, but we replace them with tourism jobs. Love the tourism jobs. We need the tourism jobs, but it's making those people have to work in those industries, and now they can't afford a house. So, natural resources. I want to bring your attention to a quick memo that came through to my desk, that there's a growth plan being studied or looked at, and in defense or support really of the growth plan, a letter was written by Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and it's for a section of area of town in northwest, it's not in the city limits, northwest Kalispell, from Stillwater Road to West Valley Drive, a roughly 4-mile drive to Old Reserve Drive. And the suggestion is, because of certain migrating birds, I love migrating birds, this is not, you know, and other possible wildlife transport, let's call it, they want to make the acreage minimum 40 acres. This is, I could I could bike there in 10 minutes probably, well, maybe not, but it's close, 40-acre minimum. So we're going to take an issue that we have with affordability of homes and make it even harder to acquire the land, make it even harder to make more homes for the people that need them. And then we're going to take the property tax responsibility that we could share with some of those additional new homes if we need them, and ask everybody else to pay for that property tax. Honestly, I think it makes no sense. I'm not here, I'm actually kind of a casual environmentalist. I mean, people that listen to me would, the serious environmentalists would probably disagree with me, right? I love animals, I think they're amazing. I'm not even a hunter. I sometimes joke around people, I don't even belong in Montana, I don't even hunt. But the point is, we have plenty of space. There's not good, these animals are not going to be any threat of extinction. So anyway, natural resources. The other thing, one thing that came up also recently on my desk, you guys probably saw this in the news, we have a school system that wants to buy a house. I guess they've bought more than one houses over time. This is in an environment where enrollment is stagnant or even going down. So we're going to ask the government to buy houses where we need houses on the market and compete with the private sector and create extra demand for houses that we don't need because we need supply, not demand. This is an affordability issue. A couple other things, shout out to the county commissioners. They did approve, I don't know how you feel about this, but they did approve gravity septics in certain cases, not across the board. I know that might offend some people. I think it's actually a smart idea. I don't know where this room would stand on that. There was a meeting we had on Thursday about building codes, trying to make building codes reasonable so in order to try to help with the affordability issue. The other thing about natural resources, just to kind of compound some of the benefits, not only would it improve the economic base, but hopefully reduce fires. Insurance premiums are an issue, making insurance premiums go down if we could responsibly, I want to really emphasize responsibly, use some of those logging resources, and then of course air quality. All right, so SB 90, I want to take a quick plug for that. SB 90, which is the bill that would take some of the tourism tax and allow the tourism tax to create a pot of revenue that could be then distributed to property owners in the state of Montana. That was the central premise. The tourist tax is the closest thing we have to a sales tax in the state of Montana. Yes, it's paid for by some people who are residents of Montana, but it's also paid substantially a lot by people who don't live in the state of Montana, which was ostensibly the idea behind the property tax bill, right? Is to have some out-of-state people shoulder the burden, right? And I don't think anybody wants a sales tax, but this could be a potential area where we could have sales tax revenue alleviate and mitigate some of the issues with property taxes. So I think that needs to have a close look on it. And I think just one other thing, I do like Senator Galt's constitutional initiative. It needs a little work, but I think it's a really good idea. One more thing, which is also maybe somewhat controversial, is I think we need school choice. And I don't know where the room sits on that. I'm never around to step on toes. It's never my intention. I love our schools. I love the people in our schools. Yeah, am I against some of the things that happen in schools? Absolutely. That's a different issue than the budget, so I'm not going to talk about that. But they need competition, frankly. And school choice is the way to get it there. And we cannot possibly emphasize this enough. Again, vote for the right people. We came so close to school choice last session. Of course, it would have gotten challenged in the courts. That's a whole nother discussion. Is the court issue. But anyway, that would help the budget as well. Thank you.
All right, next. Next, we're going to move on to income tax. The governor's #1 issue for the 2027 session is a flat income tax of 4.7. Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I seem to be the tax guy.
I really support, getting to a flat tax, but now that they've raised our property taxes so much, I think that probably comes second place to, we gotta get our property tax system fixed first. Although, the number one agenda for the Democrats coming in the 27th session is they were successful in getting to the most progressive property tax. They now want to come back and revisit our income taxes and turn it to one of the most progressive income tax systems in the United States. They've already had successes in Colorado, which has a 4.7 flat tax. They've had them on the ballot once. It did pass, where they raised taxes up to almost 9% in Colorado. And what they want to do is they want to talk to you and they say, well, we're going to take this money and we're going to use it for child care. We're going to use this money, to fund food stamps. They're all really, heartstring, ideas that they want to do that need help. But so that's how they sold it to the public in Colorado. Colorado Supreme Court actually said the initiative they passed was unconstitutional. Colorado's got some really good initiatives that were in their constitution and started years ago before they kind of turned into a blue state. So, but our income tax system right now is coupled to the federal tax system. So President Trump's big beautiful bill did a lot of good things, and those of you who are 65 plus in the room, there's a new $6,000 deduction per person. So if you're married, you get an extra $12,000 deduction. For a lot of people, that will take away any tax on their Social Security system. And there's also no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and so there's a lot of good stuff. Well, there's a lot of people who want to spend your money, and they want to decouple Montana income tax system from the federal system, so that we don't allow you to get that extra $6,000 deduction, not allow you to, get your tips will be tax-free, your premium time or your overtime. Why? They want more money to spend it. And so that's something that I've talked to the governor about, and he's not going to be supporting decoupling. So he goes, "Are you kidding me, Greg? That'll impact a lot of working class people." I go, "Yeah, kind of like your property tax bill did impacted a lot of people too, Governor." So you can't really have it both ways. You need to be consistent on your tax policy, and so, but I think income taxes, I'd like to get to a 4.7. Costs about $100 million a year out of the state budget. Because it's my years in the legislature, the only way to reduce government spending is to reduce revenue. We have had so much surplus revenue, that's why our budget has grown. We have rainy day funds that are filling and overflowing. We probably have $1.5 billion between ending funding and rainy day fund balances. We don't need any more money, but they took and shoved about $900 million into this new GO Trust, which is skimming off about $100 million out of our general fund, which is causing us some structural balance. And I think one of the first things that we need to do in the next session is unwind this GO Trust, which was also put together unconstitutionally. I may bring another lawsuit for that, because that bill has multiple appropriations in one bill too. And it's something that shouldn't be done. And Article 5, Section 11 of the Montana Constitution says, if you don't challenge a bill within 2 years after its effective date, it's law. It doesn't matter. The only way you could challenge a law then would be based on the U.S. Constitution. If it violated something in the U.S. Constitution, there's no limitation when you can go after that. But once you pass an illegal, unconstitutional bill in Montana, it's good unless you challenge it. And that's why you see a lot of lawsuits in Montana. But, we've come up with this scheme to bypass Article 5, Section 11, which needs to be put to bed, and that's part of the lawsuit issue. So, a couple other things before we get into questions too. I just want to remind you, I always hear a lot of people say, well, let's just raise property taxes on non-residents. Can't do that, that's illegal. Let's just have a sales tax just on non-residents. That's illegal too. So a lot of things that might sound good and that you think you can do, we just can't do it and thank God we can't do it either. Because you really shouldn't be treating people unfairly like that. I mean, we have equal protection laws, equal treatment laws. I mean, that's what this country's all about. It's not going after one particular class or type of individuals where we start having class warfare in the state.
All right, well, Senator Glim had mentioned how Senator Hertz has been in taxation for a couple of years, to say the least. The reason we are tied to the federal deductions is because of Senator Hertz's bill, and he will ensure it doesn't decouple. So he was the one that actually brought that forward. So, with that, before we get into our closing comments and get on to questions, Social Security tax, we're one of 8 states now in the nation that still taxes Social Security at some point. The one big beautiful bill that took the $12,000 off for the couple, $6,000 a piece. We have the Department of Revenue and our own legislative support team looking at that, tracking it, and by June, July, they're going to brief out to the Revenue Committee exactly how much that's saving seniors on it. And if it takes so much off that we believe it will, we'll be having a lot better chance of getting rid of Social Security tax for seniors in Montana. I know Representative soon-to-be Senator Lloyd wants to bring that on the Senate side, and I'll bring it again in the House side and see what happens. But with that, we got about 5 minutes each for closing comments before we go to questions.
I won't take 5 minutes. Yeah, I think we can get to questions. I will, hopefully you've heard a recurring theme that it matters who you send to Helena. In addition to donating to Senator Hertz's lawsuit fund, which we should introduce Kate, because we have this tradition in the Senate that we always introduce Kate every day. That's Senator Hertz's wife. But she's super excited about all these lawsuits and paying for them too. So if you want to donate to that, that'd be a great help. I've also got some envelopes with me that are for the Montana Freedom Caucus PAC. And if you're interested in seeing statewide better candidates elected, stick some money in some of those envelopes, and that's what the Freedom Caucus is about doing, is getting better legislators to the legislature. So I'd appreciate help there.
All right, so we come up with a lot of ideas. So I know a lot of you are here concerned about your property taxes. So what are we going to do? So number one, we need to win these lawsuits. Because if we don't win the lawsuits, I don't believe the legislature is going to react. And we need to win, particularly also the second lawsuit, so we can get back to one tax rate and make it more fair. And then we need to take some money. We've got $900 million sitting in a GO trust. The average tax reduction was $500. If we just want to use that money to fund for the next 8 years and give people $500 tax reduction and bring everybody else's property taxes back down, we could do that. So there's a lot of different ideas, and the idea of taking money that is sitting at the state and growing our government, as Carl said, whether it's the bed tax dollars, whether it's marijuana money. We brought in about $100 million of marijuana money, and that just kind of poof, disappeared into the state budget. So that needs to go back. The bed tax dollars needs to go back to where it was originated. The impact that it impacts here on Flathead County and the amount of bed tax. And Flathead County might be the #1 county in bed tax collection, I believe. So those monies could come back here and be used for road improvements, law enforcement, a lot of other things that could lower property taxes. But no, we keep it at the state, so we can spend it there, which we don't need to do. And so I think that needs to be a big push. So once we get to the session, I believe, and if the courts force us to visit property taxes again, then by God, everybody in this room needs to show up in Helena, because that's the problem. You don't really know what's going to happen until you get your bill, and that's unfortunate. But this time, people have gotten their damn bills, and they're going to get them again in this November and on the second home taxes, and they're gonna see it again. So we're gonna have a lot, probably over 100,000 people are gonna see tax increases, and so we need each and every one of you to show up at Helena. That's how things get done in Helena, is when people show up. Because if you don't show up, well, there's not a problem then. So we're gonna need buses loaded, we get people at Helena.
Just a couple straggler comments. One is a kind of a brief story. So my first session, sitting in appropriations, a little bit naive, thinking that most people in the room think that taxpayer money is taxpayer money. It belongs to them. It came from them, and it belongs to them. We had this is even hard to say because I feel like we're so irresponsible with this. But we had a $4 billion projected general fund surplus in my first session. Blew me away. $4 billion. The general fund budget is only $3 billion. So we had like double the money we needed. And we gave back a paltry $850 million back to the people. And so I had an amendment in appropriations to increase the amount to give back to the people. And I said that this is the people's money. This is their money. And Representative Fitzpatrick, I'm not ashamed to name his name, Representative John Fitzpatrick, said immediately on the microphone, I don't think this is the people's money. And he's a Republican, or at least he has an R behind his name. One of my other fellow representatives popped up right away and said, Representative Fitzpatrick, if the people didn't give us money, we wouldn't have any money. And so I think they think that this is the kind of mentality that we're fighting against, but we're fighting with guns that have no bullets. We don't have the people that are going to fight this battle and win. I have a little analogy for you. So if you're football fans, there's an amazing Packer fan right there. Governor-elect Tanner Smith is back there. So football analogy, halftime. We're down about 17-3 at halftime. Okay, we're getting kind of kicked, but we still think we have a chance. And maybe if we just made a couple adjustments, we could get some points on the board. And so fast forward to 10 seconds left in the game. Now we're behind 45-6. We're getting crushed. We're getting annihilated on the football field. You can imagine what that feels like, right? They have the ball on our 20-yard line. Now, normally when you have a situation like this, the team that's winning by that much is going to go in what they call victory formation and kneel on the ball, okay? They don't want to score anymore. No, not these guys. They're on our 20-yard line. They pass the ball with 10 seconds left. They score a touchdown, okay? Now there's 2 seconds left. The extra point is untimed down. They could go for one, or should we go for two or kick for one? They go for two, and they make it. So now there's still 2 seconds left. They kick off the ball. They kick an onside kick and recover the ball. That's how it felt, being on the losing team in the legislature this last session. It was brutal. Hopefully that maybe gives you some indication of just how brutal it was. And then one more thing I want to point out on this property tax bill that gets kind of overlooked. This is something I said on the microphone a lot. We are giving a statewide solution to an issue that's not a statewide problem. So let me explain. They did a map. It's an interactive map. And you can look on that map and highlight your cursor over any county and see what the median value of that home is and what their property tax bill was and what it went down to. And many of these people in the eastern side of the state, the median property value is $110,000, $140,000. Their property tax bills are $1,200 or less. Mm-hmm. And any of us in the room would dream to have that for a tax bill, right? But they're getting 40% off of their property tax bill because they're part of the state of Montana, and the new rates for homestead properties lowers your tax rates by that much, okay? Now, are they going to pay for it somewhere else? Yeah, we've demonstrated plenty of times that it's a tax shift. Okay, so now the commercial properties, the ag properties over there are all paying to make up for it, because you know that the budget is not decreasing in those counties. I mean, okay, there actually are a couple exceptions to that, but for the most part, they're not. So they still have to pay for it in the higher price of whatever, groceries, shoes, gas, whatever, agriculture. So it's not necessarily a windfall to them either, but why are we prescribing statewide solutions to problems that are not statewide? I had another thought, but I lost it, so maybe I'll think about it later. I really want to hear from you folks, though, and what your questions are.
All right, how many people in here have questions? Non-political, non-public elected officials have questions. Okay, if you want to come up, line up over here behind this podium. Okay, well, Francis.
There was a lot of taxes that will hit the farmers now, besides, there's got their house tax. But what about their farmland? Is that gonna be taxed higher?
So agricultural property is one area that we tax correctly. We tax agricultural property based on production value, not fair market value. All the rest of us get taxed at fair market value. So are their taxes going up? Yeah, they are. I would say as a percentage, not a huge amount. Where they're really gonna get hit though is, a lot of farmers have 2 or 3 homes on their property for their workers, and those taxes on a lot of those could double, because they're gonna, right this year they're at 0.76, now they're gonna go up to 1.35 on that.
All right, we'll start taking questions. Tanner Smith.
Thank you, good representative. I'll make it quick. Obviously, I served with these guys in the state legislature in 23. Caleb Hinkle carried that bill for the 2% cap. We couldn't get it off the ground anywhere. My solution to fixing this, because I'm just a simple contractor from Lakeside, is I'm instituting a tax boycott. If you go to tanner4montana.com, that's our way to leverage our money by not playing their game, by not paying your taxes. I know it sounds like we should be paying taxes, but if you'll join me in this cause, we will win this thing. People are joining every day. What you do is sign the pledge, and then I just give those raw data, that raw number to the DOR to say, these people have had enough. You're biting the hand that feeds you, because they're going after the heavy hitters. My Lakeside people, my Summers people, Bitterroot Lake, the people they're trying to hammer the most are the ones that pay the biggest part of that pie. Now, I would remind you that your property taxes, they can't put you in jail, they can't levy your bank account, it doesn't affect your credit score, and it takes up to 3 years of non-payment whatsoever before they can actually sell that lien. So dig in, now's the time, just like with kids in the allowance. If my kids are spending money willy-nilly, I don't give them their allowance. It's us to take our power back and force tax reform and leverage your money by divesting in the property tax scheme. Because these guys are doing the yeoman's work if you're trying to fix it, but they don't have the votes. The lawsuits are great. Hopefully that bears fruit, but I know one thing for sure, if we don't pay, then they have to get a special session to fix it. So tanner4montana.com, hit the button, take the tax pledge. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Sounds like a damn politician.
Thank you guys for putting this on. I believe Senator Hertz touched on this, the bed tax. Can't we just have a simple bill that just says that the bed tax, when it's collected, goes to the county that it's collected in, as opposing filling the $2 billion surplus we've been having for years?
Carl tried that.
Yeah, it's a simple bill, it's just a matter of getting the votes to get it passed. That's the struggle. Again, it depends on who you send to Helena.
Part of the problem with that, and I brought a bill last time, I'm gonna bring another one this time. We have taxpayer-funded lobbyists in Helena. They use tax dollars, League of Cities and MACO and other organizations, schools, come to Helena using your money to lobby to raise your taxes. And when we were trying to move the bed tax back to local governments where it belongs, all the people who get the handouts from the bed tax, they all got their paid lobbyists to come there to oppose it, and it was very hard to get those bills passed. So one of my number one priorities is to stop using taxpayer dollars that fund lobbyists in the state of Montana. If I get that on the ballot,
The one thing I haven't heard anything about is that we're all talking about what we're gonna, how much we give to get things done, but how much fraud is going on in the system? Could we get a Doge kind of?
I'll take that one real quick. There's 50 states, 3 territories, and the District of Columbia in the federal government. We've had one Doge at one state. That was Louisiana. The governor directed it, and within 3 weeks, the legislature took $1 billion out, and they're going back and looking at it for the next year. To get a Doge out, to go through and have a multi-year look by appropriations and finance and claims and the other committees to look at the core functions in every agency and take out what is not a core function. Do you need a Department of Commerce? How many more tourists do you want in the Flathead? Do you need a lot of the DEQ portions? What can come out? And that's what, until you get the votes and a governor that will support it, it's not going to happen in Montana.
A governor to support it, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, you guys, for your time. I heard a reoccurring theme from when you were talking about who send the right people to the legislature. I'm frustrated about that because these people in this room can probably send the appropriate people to the legislature, but when you got people in Ponderay County sending that screwball Lou Jones in there, he's either there for the House or the Senate. You know, and I heard you guys mention that there were 9 or 10 people that flipped this thing. Where were they from and who are they? Name names.
I'll name them. So there's 9 senators in the Senate that flipped, and it was Shelley Vance out of Bozeman. She's up for re-election. Caleb Hinkle is running against her. Let's see. Wendy McCamey out of Great Falls. She is not running for re-election, so that seat will be up, vacated. Josh Kastmeyer out of Fort Benton, and he is a holdover senator. So in the Senate, we don't run every time you're elected to a 4-year term. Gail Lammers out of Hardin. He's a holdover senator. 5. Butch Gillespie out of Shelby. He is termed out. Russ Temple from Chinook. He's termed out. Ellsworth out of the Bitterroot, and he is under indictment. Denley Logie from Superior, and who am I missing? Oh, Greg Hunter out of, where's he from? Oh, he's from where the Freud, which used to be the National Center for the Communist Party in America. Maybe there's a connection. Anyway. Do I have a list? Yeah, I got it here. I got envelopes. For the Freedom Caucus. And we are a PAC that is supporting good conservative candidates across the state and fighting against the bad ones. So your point about Lou Jones, that's one of them that we're playing in that race a lot. Good. So Zach Worth, if you know anybody over there, Zach Worth is running against him. Great guy, and that is a district that runs all the way from Helena, in the Valley floor of Helena, all the way up to Ponderay County, Conrad. Does it get into? I can't remember if it gets. Yeah, it gets into Shelby. I think it runs right up to the Canadian border there. You want the envelope?
I do want the envelopes, actually. I gave the max to Zach Worth already, But yeah, absolutely. Just want to make sure there's one thing really crystal clear that he didn't say, that I want. We can elect representatives here because we vote, but we can support the good legislators, good candidates throughout the state, and that's what he's saying. So let's support these, and if you have any questions, I am so committed. I can't possibly convince you any more than I'm trying right now. I am so committed to make a difference. And so, I don't know if my cell phone, I'm sure you can find it on the internet. I want to help you figure out who the right people are to support. So, we can do it.
But fourth generation, my grandparents came here in the 40s. We have basically a shed, but okay, shop, little cabin, and the assessed value went up 120%. And in talking to the Lake County assessor, that stretch of Swan Lake is probably some of the highest appreciation in the state. And I look at my next generation, and they are going to be forced to sell. So, you know, those numbers, 72% are Montana homeowners, which is what I see in these second homes. And of course, we believe in real estate to invest your property and get appreciation. And wouldn't we all love it if you could buy a home here anywhere in Flathead County for under $400,000? Like, yeah, that would be fabulous. Representative Byrne, you put up a couple slides at the very beginning, and maybe now's not the correct time, but just right away off the bat, the heading said commercial. I'm really just asking for a clarification because I think there might have been an interpretation that those appreciations were residential, and I want to understand myself those first couple slides. I did make a few notes here, so who knows what else I might have on this list. But now I'm going to get food for my unpopular comment is I am a proponent of sales tax, and I also recognize that we have two taxes. We add that, we'd have a third, and everybody says, well, okay, if we got rid of one of them, I think that's not possible. But there are other avenues of getting income, as you said, bed tax, alcohol, vehicles. But if I have the numbers right, it's 2.5 to 3 million that we're getting from property taxes. No, billion. And sales tax, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, might offset that by 1.4. And
may I interrupt just for a second?
Please, Terry.
The Constitution says we
4%.
That's right, and that would raise 1.4 billion.
So we're still cutting it in half and reducing that. And we have a constitution that says it's capped at 4%. And we can legislate that it doesn't apply to basic needs of groceries and drugs. So again, I think that income tax, sales taxes are based on our ability to pay, where property taxes, and I'll use my mother, who was not on a financial assistance, but another example earlier about, you know, elderly people that have fixed incomes, and when your taxes go up that much, lived in their house since the 50s, and now they are forced out of it when they're 80 or 90 years old. Again, just not right. I think that's about all I have to say, so thanks for listening to me, and I'd love to see those slides again. Thanks, Terry.
Susan, I would just like to ask you a question.
You bet.
I don't know what your experience is with other states that have introduced a third tax without eliminating one of the other two, but the general experience that I've seen is after a while, you might reduce the property tax, but after a while it increases again. Is that your experience? Do you understand? Like, how long would it take, do you think, for the government to then just allow the other tax that they reduced to go right back where it was before the sales tax?
But don't you think we can control that legislatively and constitutionally? Okay, I guess I'm getting laughed at here.
Well, we sure tried, but we don't. One thing that we really tried, the theme you first mentioned is, or maybe it was the previous speaker, we just don't have the votes to restrain government growth as it is right now. And it doesn't seem like that's going to, I mean, we're hoping to change that.
Let's vote in the right people.
Amen.
And your cabin on the lake,
Yes,
it's going up at least 68% again this year.
I know.
Thank you. This has been a lot of useful information. So, tangent to the last question in terms of all the property values going up. And this is especially like on Flathead Lake or Swan Lake, we would even a double whammy, right? Because now not only property taxes going up, water levels are going down. So you actually get to use the lake even less. So what's being done to rein that in? I mean, it seems like, I don't know, I think the tribe's in charge right now, and you hear a lot of things, they're just selling the water. But it used to be for 40 years, you had a situation where the Army Corps of Engineers ran it, and it ran like clockwork. You never had to worry about it. And now it's been passed on. So, you know, you've had a huge spike in property taxes, and again, the water level is completely inconsistent and usually against homeowners.
Yeah, we've got some new operators at Kerr Dam at south end of Flathead Lake who really are having some problems on looking at flows. I think they did a better job last summer, but Representative Zinke had a bill that basically said you need to match inflows with outflows with between June 15th and September 15th, and hopefully we can continue to get that bill going forward. There's also some work with the several organizations working on amending the FERC license too, which is a license that Energy Keepers operates the dam under. So it's difficult, but there's a lot of people working on it. If you notice, Flathead Lake has come up probably in the last week or so, about a foot. And so I just talked to the president of Energy Keepers, and he goes, "Yeah, Greg, we're really looking at this. It looks like runoff's going to be early." I go, "Yeah, it is. And there's not going to be a whole lot of it." So there's a lot of different abilities, but you know, I think there's a lot of people out there working on it. But it's not an easy task, especially when you're working against an entity that is owned by a tribal organization, and the state doesn't have much pressure that we can put on. It all comes from the federal government.
Is it possible at some point, I mean, obviously it'd be a long time, to get that back in state control? Probably not.
No, I really doubt it. So, I mean, the dam sits on tribal land, and when they originally entered into an agreement with Montana Power Company and built the dam, their agreement basically said the tribe had the right to buy that as their lease is expiring. And so there's no way that will, I can't imagine that CSKT will end up selling that property to anybody else. So.
Right. Thank you.
The thing for Lake County is we're losing, when that went to tribal ownership, now we're up to losing $2 million a year in property taxes in Lake County because the tribe doesn't pay property taxes. It's very similar to, you know, the hospital here that has eaten up and absorbed all the doctors who used to pay property taxes at their own facilities. But, you know, a lot of these nonprofit, non-taxable entities are really increasing all of our taxes, even though they need services too.
We got about 10 minutes left, I believe, before they start telling us to shut down, but we're all available afterwards. A lot of the elected officials in here informally, if you talk to Dr. Al, he could probably do his own 3-hour brief because he's got 100 ideas on property tax. So we're going to get going. And
Thank you again, gentlemen, for explaining everything very well, and thank you to my fellow citizens for showing up to an event like this. We definitely feel the pain of the property tax increase. We split time between Missoula and here, and yeah, our commercial building went up 50%, so we're feeling the pain on that. Two-part question to segue off of Susan's comments on sales tax. I know none of you have a crystal ball, but curious to know if in the next legislative session, sales tax, does it get talked about every single legislative session? What's the likelihood of that going through? Second question, on the revenue decrease side, I'm wondering if you guys have been bantering around the idea that Ron DeSantis has done in Florida of eliminating property tax for people 65 and older.
Sales tax in Montana is historically no-go, and I think It really doesn't get talked about every legislative session. There might be some talk about it this time, but I don't see it having any legs because of the fact that you can't control, we can't control it. We can't control the growth we have right now. So you add in another tax and we're just gonna keep spending and keep growing government. So we don't have the restraint that we need. Eliminating property tax on those over 65. There again, I kind of like the idea, but on the other hand, then you're shifting that to everybody else, right?
Not if you're saying to government to spend less, just collect less money. It's toward your point of saying decrease the revenue. It's the only way to control government.
Yeah,
So-
you're right. But the problem is we don't, counties aren't limited like that. Counties float the mills, so they'll always get their money. So it always shifts to somebody else. At the state, we can serve the beast. At the counties, much harder.
On the sales tax issue, there are some people talking, and we've been working with them, is to bring a constitutional amendment that basically says if we have a sales tax, 80–90% of it must be used to reduce property taxes. I think that's the only way the citizens of Montana, it's the only way I would support something like that, is if it was in the Constitution, because once it's in the Constitution, then the legislature has to follow that.
Ready to read? First of all, thank you guys for being here. I know you're giving up your family time to come here and talk to us about what you've seen in Helena and a failed tax structure. And fortunately or unfortunately, I've seen it too. In fact, I've been involved in 8 budgets, one of the agencies of state government in Helena. So I know what goes on. But I think first off, we have to thank our county commissioners because you saw the charts up there. We had a decrease because they didn't spend all the revenue that they could have in this county. And when you talk about changing the budget structure and you talk about changing spending, it takes three entities. One, you got to have a good governor. You really do. That's key to all of this. You guys can do all the work you want, but if you do not have a good governor, you aren't going to get it done. Number 2, you need good county commissioners statewide that understand that decreasing spending doesn't mean you're decreasing services. You need to understand that. Just because we cut revenue or we can't cut revenue, that does not mean we have to cut services. The problem in government spending isn't the employees. I can tell you that firsthand. I've had a private company with my own private employees, and I've had a state agency, a very large state agency for 7 years with a lot of employees. They're not the problem. The problem is middle management and upper management of those agencies. That's the problem. And that problem starts at the governor's level because they appoint those people. And so when you're looking at this, people in the stands here listening, is you got to really understand that a governor is very, very important in controlling spending in the state of Montana and maintaining the level of services that you really need to have here that you can actually get. Another big problem you have in the legislature, I'm going to give you an idea, and it's an idea that's not mine, that's been discussed for many, many years. But they never really discuss it in full because it takes a lot of work. And it's called zero-based budgeting. And what you need to do is, and I've talked about it a lot, I don't want to waste your time here going through it. There's different ways you can do zero-based budgeting to make it very effective. Right now, if you guys don't know, when I submitted the budget, and I submitted 4 of them to the legislature, they just look at my increase of my last year's budget. That's all they analyze. And in fairness, they're there 90 days. They've got a lot of things going on, and they got to get billion-dollar budgets approved. Now, I'm not making an excuse for them, but that's what they have there. So they have to set up a budget process. One is they approved a budget 2 years ago. So I submit that budget, and then I get present law adjustments to that budget, which that means increases in inflation, health insurance, whatever the case may be, just natural, legal increases to that budget. That's called present law adjustments. Boom, your budget just went up. We wonder how budgets grow, that's how they grow. Then the next thing they look at is any additions to that budget. So really, they spend all their time looking at the additions. They don't really look at the present law, and they don't really look at the base budget. That's the governor's job, and the governors fail at that element. And they sometimes do it for their good reasons to do it. So my advice to you is go back to the budget process, look really closely between now and the next legislative session to look at some state agencies you can put in zero-based budgeting. And then look at those new expenditures that you're going to approve as one-time only expenditures. Now, why I'm saying that is when they look at their budget and they approve an additional expenditure, that's now on next year's biennial budget. Your budget just grew. They don't look at that again. But if they said one time only, and that agency needs to do it again, then they have to look at it again and again and again. And it's the only way you're going to decrease government. So those are my ideas to you legislators, and I'm going to tell you, I've done this a lot of times to legislators. You go to Helena, and no one ever calls. They say they want the help. Well, you get there, and I know what happens. You get flooded with a bunch of things, and you can't actually get out of your chair, so to speak. But you got to look at people other than your legislature that are not lobbyists, that understand how this budget process works to fix this state. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well said, and you are right. It all starts with the governor.
Let's go.
The governor could have vetoed this property tax bill. The governor could tell his department directors, I want you to go in there and I want you to cut your budget 10%. We have not had a governor to even do that or attempt to do that. Even 1%, yeah. All they want to do is just, oh, we'll keep it flat. Well, you get present law adjustments, as Carl knows, it's difficult.
Okay,
Ron DeSantis did that, though. He came and talked to us, and he charged his people with doing that, and they did. They cut their budget in Florida. It's granted, it's a great big budget, a lot bigger budget than ours, but zero-based budgeting, I've been hounding on that for 6 sessions. We're finally gaining some traction. We're doing little bits and pieces at a time. Some of it in the interim, some of it during session, but we're starting to get that process moving forward, and also looking into performance budgeting, which is basing your budget on results and how well your results work, and that drives where you put your dollar.
Carl, you can do this. It's not that difficult.
It's the same thing. You have to get everybody on board. I've been pushing it for 6 sessions. 12 years I've been pushing it. Finally getting a little bit of traction. It's the right people there.
3 things. Kate Vandemore here, hi. Thank you for all being here and doing this thing. The natural resources, were you aware of the Reclamation Fund and how much money goes from Montana Resource Development to the federal government into a natural resources fund? What comes back to Montana is about $15 million in that every year. That's the Natural Resources Fund in the Department of the Interior, the Reclamation Fund. I know 15 million is not like 1.2 billion, but if you want to get money back to the people, that's there. Second aspect of that, do you know who's grabbing that money? Department of Natural Resources, which probably has its own $15 million slush fund, which I believe that you all should look at, because one of the things that's happened to Montana citizens is the failure of the Department of Natural Resources to protect water rights and citizen rights. Third question is, would you be surprised to know that Kerr Dam is actually a federal dam? It is not owned by the CSKT. You can find that in the annual budget. It's owned by the BIA, and so they have a chance to manage it. And so therefore, this dam could be taken over if you want to, but the federal government's responsible for making sure that the tribes follow the FERC license. So sources of money, opportunity on Kerr Dam. Thanks very much.
I just have a quick question. Since the governor doesn't want to cut anything and he just continues to grow the budget, do we have anybody, when is his term up, and do we have anybody standing in the wings that would be a Donald Trump Doge person? Elon Musk.
Governor is up in at the end of 2028, his terms expire, and so in the 28 election cycle, there'll be numerous people running for governor. I'm not running for governor, and nor anything else. But no, we've got quite a few people will be stepping up between now and then. We're really going to make sure whoever steps up is a very conservative governor, something like DeSantis in Florida, so we can get the state heading in the right direction.
Your son Adam.
Adam Burns would be very good, but I don't think he'll run.
And I just want to ask, I believe it was Representative Fox had mentioned about the government buying houses. And I used to go to school board meetings, and I was wondering, I know one time they mentioned something about buying homes for the teachers. That's not what you were talking about, is it?
Yeah, that actually is what I'm talking about. There's a property adjacent to the school across the street. They don't actually have a designated purpose for it. That was one of the talking points, I think, to maybe, perhaps, I wasn't there, perhaps to win over enough support to vote for that acquisition. I don't know. I don't really know. There was some mention about other homes that were purchased in past history that were used for classroom and classroom growth. So there isn't a definite use right now, but that is a potential use, yes.
And I heard that at Big Fork High School meeting several years ago. What school were you talking about?
Yeah, this is School District 5.
What school is it?
I believe it's Flydale.
Flydale High School.
Thank you.
Last one.
Hey, I'd just like to remind everybody on the election of 2020, it's a lot of fraud, right? How much money do we spend on the machines? Statewide. I understand it's a county thing, but if we were to take that away, how much money would we save and actually send the people we want to home? Yes. That's it.
Thank you. It's $150,000 per machine.
What?
That's not bad at all.
All right, well, thank you all for coming out. We'll be around for any other questions. If you have any questions or comments or other ideas, there's some sheets on the table out front to put your name down and write what the question, issue is, and we'll get back with you. Come on up and talk to us for the next however long it takes. Thanks for coming.